You know, it would be such a waste if I had lived all these years and never learned that the best things in life aren't things at all. So today, this video is one that I've been wanting to make for quite some time, and it's about why simplicity has become my greatest luxury. How letting go of more gave me everything I actually needed. Hello and welcome. It's so wonderful to see you again. I hope you're all doing well. I have to tell you, I'm sitting here in my home and I just finished going through another box of things from New York. And you know what I realized as I was unpacking? I don't need half of this stuff. I really don't. And it got me thinking about this topic that so many of you have asked me about, because you see me living more simply now, and you want to know how I got here and why, and what it's taught me. And I'm going to share all of that with you today because this is something that I think is so important, especially as we get older, but really at any age, understanding that simplicity isn't about deprivation. It's not about having nothing. It's actually about having everything that matters and letting go of everything that doesn't. And that, my friends, is the greatest luxury I have ever experienced. Now, before we get into this, I just want to say that the landscaper is outside working on the yard. So if you hear some noise in the background, that's what it is. But I'm here and I want to talk to you about this because I think in our culture, we've been sold this lie that more is better, that accumulating things and experiences and commitments makes us successful, makes us happy. And I bought into that lie for so many years of my life, and I can tell you from experience, it is absolutely not true. When more became less. You know, I didn't always live simply. In fact, for most of my life, I was the opposite. I was someone who thought that having more meant that I was doing well, that I was successful. I had the big house filled with furniture and decorations. I had closets full of clothes, many with the tag still on them. I had kitchen cabinets overflowing with gadgets I used once or never. I had a calendar so packed with commitments and obligations that I couldn't even tell you what I actually wanted to do versus what I felt I had to do. And I thought that was success. I thought that was what life was supposed to look like. And then something shifted. And it wasn't one big moment, it was a series of small realizations over many years. I started to notice that I felt anxious in my own home because there was so much stuff everywhere. I started to notice that I was spending my weekends maintaining things, cleaning things, organizing things, moving things from one place to another, instead of actually enjoying my life. I started to notice that I couldn't find things I actually needed because they were buried under all the things I didn't need. And I started to ask myself, why? Why do I have all of this stuff? What is it actually adding to my life? And the honest answer was, nothing. It was adding nothing. It was actually taking away. It was taking my time, my energy, my peace of mind, my space. And I started to realize that more had become less. The more I had, the less freedom I had, the less peace I had, the less time I had for the things that actually mattered. The weight of possessions. Here's something that nobody tells you about having a lot of stuff. It's heavy. Not just physically, although it is that too, but emotionally and mentally. Every single thing you own requires something from you. It requires space, it requires maintenance, it requires mental energy to remember where it is and what you're going to do with it. And when you have a lot of things, that weight adds up, and it becomes this burden that you carry around without even realizing it. I didn't understand this until Arthur passed away, and I had to go through our apartment in New York and start making decisions about all of the things we had accumulated over decades of marriage. And let me tell you, that was overwhelming, absolutely overwhelming. We had closets full of things we hadn't looked at in years. We had storage units with boxes we hadn't opened since we put them there. We had duplicates and triplicates of things because we'd forgotten we already had them, and we bought more. And as I was going through all of that, I felt this heaviness in my chest, because every single item was a decision I had to make. Keep it, give it away, sell it, throw it away. And multiply that by thousands and thousands of items, and you can imagine how exhausting that was. And I thought to myself, why did we keep all of this? Why did we let it accumulate like this? What were we thinking? But I know what we were thinking. We were thinking the same thing everyone thinks: we might need it someday. It was expensive, so we can't get rid of it. It was a gift, so we have to keep it. It has sentimental value. We'll use it eventually. All of these stories we tell ourselves to justify holding on to things that are actually just weighing us down. And I made a decision right then and there that I was going to let go of the weight. I was going to keep only the things that I truly loved or truly needed, and let everything else go. And I cannot tell you how liberating that was, how free I felt every time I let go of another box of things. It was like I could breathe a little bit easier, like I was shedding this armor I'd been carrying around for years. Simplifying relationships. Now, this one might be controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway. Simplicity isn't just about things, it's also about relationships. And I don't mean that you should cut people out of your life carelessly or without thought. But what I do mean is that as I've gotten older, I've realized that I don't have the time or the energy for relationships that don't nourish me, for relationships that are one-sided or draining or based on obligation rather than genuine connection. I used to say yes to every social invitation. I used to maintain friendships out of habit or history, even when those friendships had run their course. I used to spend time with people who left me feeling depleted rather than uplifted because I thought that's what you're supposed to do. But you know what? Life is too short. Life is way too short to spend your precious time and energy on relationships that don't add value to your life. And so I started to simplify. I started to let some relationships naturally fade. I started to say no to invitations that I didn't actually want to accept. I started to prioritize the people who truly matter to me, the people who fill my cup rather than drain it, the people who I can be authentic with rather than having to perform for. And that simplification has been just as liberating as getting rid of physical stuff, maybe even more so, because when you simplify your relationships, you create space for the relationships that really matter. You can go deeper with the people you truly love. You can give more of yourself because you're not spreading yourself so thin. And those relationships become richer and more meaningful. And that is luxury. That is true luxury. The tyranny of the busy calendar. Oh, let me tell you about calendars. I used to have a calendar that was so packed that I had to color code it just to keep track of everything I was doing. I had committees I was on, social obligations, I had committed to activities, I had signed up for appointments and meetings and lunches and dinners and on and on and on. And I wore that busy calendar like a badge of honor. I thought it meant I was important, that I was needed, that I was living a full life. But you know what? I was exhausted. I was running from one thing to the next. I never had a moment to just breathe, to just be. I was always late to everything because I had scheduled things too close together. I wasn't fully present at anything because I was always thinking about the next thing I had to rush off to. And I started to ask myself, is this really living? Is this really what I want my life to look like? And the answer was no, absolutely not. So I started to simplify my calendar. I started to say no to things. I started to leave space between commitments. I started to have days where I had nothing scheduled at all. Nothing. And at first, that felt terrifying, absolutely terrifying, because I had been busy for so long that I didn't know what to do with empty time. I didn't know who I was without a packed calendar. But then something beautiful happened. I started to enjoy that empty time. I started to use it for things that actually fed my soul. Reading, sitting in my garden, taking a walk with no destination, calling a friend just to chat, not because it was scheduled, but because I felt like it. And I realized that this was the luxury I had been chasing all along. Not the packed calendar, but the spacious one. Not the busy life, but the intentional one. Mental simplicity and the quiet mind. You know, one of the things that happens when you simplify your external life is that your internal life becomes simpler too. When you have less stuff, you have fewer decisions to make. When you have fewer commitments, you have less to worry about. When you have simpler relationships, you have less drama and less emotional chaos. And all of that creates space for mental simplicity, for a quieter mind. And I cannot overstate how valuable that is in our world today. We are constantly bombarded with information, with noise, with stimulation. Our minds are constantly going, and we never get a break. And that takes a toll, a real toll on our mental health, on our ability to think clearly, on our creativity, on our peace of mind. When I started to simplify my life, I noticed that my mind became quieter. I had more mental space. I could think more clearly. I could be more present. I wasn't constantly making lists in my head of all the things I had to do and all the stuff I had to deal with and all the people I had to get back to. I had space. I had quiet. And that quiet became precious to me, absolutely precious. I protect that quiet now. I protect my mental space the same way I protect my physical space. I'm very careful about what I let into my mind. I don't watch the news all day long like I used to. I don't scroll social media for hours. I don't fill every quiet moment with podcasts or music or television. I allow myself to just be in the quiet, and that has been transformative. Absolutely transformative. The simplicity of a simple wardrobe, let me tell you about my closet. I used to have a closet that was bursting with clothes. I had clothes in every color, clothes for every possible occasion, clothes that didn't fit, but I was keeping them just in case, clothes that I didn't even like, but I felt guilty getting rid of because I had spent money on them. And you know what happened? Every morning I would stand in front of that overflowing closet and feel like I had nothing to wear. Nothing? Isn't that ridiculous? I had hundreds of pieces of clothing, and I felt like I had nothing to wear. And I would spend 30 minutes trying on different outfits and feeling frustrated and ending up wearing the same few things I always wore because those were the things I actually liked and felt good in. So why was I keeping all the rest? So I simplified my wardrobe drastically. I got rid of everything that didn't fit, everything that I didn't love, everything that didn't make me feel good. And you know what? I'm left with a much smaller wardrobe, but every single piece in it I love. Every single piece fits me and makes me feel good. And getting dressed in the morning has become so simple and so pleasant instead of stressful. And here's what I learned. You don't need a lot of clothes. You really don't. You need clothes that fit well, that are comfortable, that make you feel good, that work for your actual life, not for some imaginary life you think you might live someday. And when you have that, getting dressed becomes effortless, and that is luxury. That is true luxury. Not having a closet full of clothes you don't wear, but having a closet full of clothes you love. Simplifying my home environment. You know, after Arthur passed away, I made the decision to simplify my living situation. I didn't need a big house anymore. I didn't need all that space, all those rooms, all that maintenance. And I moved to a smaller place here in Florida, and it was the best decision I could have made. The absolute best decision, because now I live in a space that is manageable. I can clean it myself, I can maintain it myself, I'm not overwhelmed by it. And I have filled it only with things that I love, only with things that are beautiful or useful or meaningful. And walking into my home now, I feel peace, I feel calm, I feel like I can breathe because it's not cluttered, it's not chaotic, it's simple and it's lovely. And I want you to understand that simplifying your home doesn't mean it has to be sterile or cold or boring. It just means that everything in it should have a purpose, should have meaning. You don't need 15 decorative pillows on your couch. You don't need knickknacks on every surface. You don't need stuff just for the sake of having stuff. You need the things that make your home feel like a sanctuary, and everything else is just clutter. I have learned that less is more, that empty space is beautiful, that I would rather have one piece of art that I absolutely love than 10 pieces that are just filling a wall. And that philosophy has made my home a place that I love to be, in a place that supports me rather than drains me. The luxury of simple meals. You know, I used to think that I had to cook these elaborate meals all the time, that I had to have a kitchen full of every gadget and ingredient, and that mealtime had to be this big production. And that was exhausting, absolutely exhausting, especially when Arthur got sick and I was caring for him and trying to maintain all of that. And then I discovered the luxury of simple meals. Simple, fresh ingredients prepared simply. And you know what? They taste better. They're better for you. They take less time. They require less cleanup. And eating becomes about nourishment and enjoyment rather than about performance or stress. I eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. I eat simply prepared fish. I eat whole grains and nuts and seeds, and I don't make it complicated. I don't spend hours in the kitchen anymore, and I enjoy my meals more than I did when I was making those elaborate productions, because there's no stress, there's no pressure. It's just simple, nourishing food. And the same goes for my kitchen. I got rid of all the gadgets I never used, all the duplicate pots and pans, all the things that were just taking up space. And now I have a simple kitchen with the tools I actually use, and cooking has become pleasant again instead of overwhelming decision fatigue, and the freedom of fewer choices. Here's something that people don't talk about enough. Every single day we make thousands of decisions, and every decision takes mental energy. What to wear, what to eat, what to do, where to go, who to see. And when you have a lot of stuff, a lot of commitments, a lot of options, you have to make a lot more decisions, and that is exhausting. There's actually research on this. It's called decision fatigue, and it's real. The more decisions you have to make, the more exhausted you become, and the worse your decisions get as the day goes on. And I noticed this in my own life. When I had a closet full of clothes, I had to make decisions every morning. When I had a pantry full of food, I had to make decisions about meals. When I had a packed calendar, I had to make constant decisions about timing and prioritizing. But when I simplified, when I reduced my options, something beautiful happened. I had fewer decisions to make, and that freed up mental energy for the decisions that actually mattered. I wasn't exhausted from deciding what to wear, so I had more energy to think about creative projects. I wasn't stressed about meal planning, so I had more mental space for the people I love. And that is a luxury that you cannot buy. That is a luxury that only comes from simplicity, from having fewer choices, fewer options, fewer things competing for your attention and your mental energy. Quality over quantity in everything. This is really the heart of simplicity, understanding that quality matters so much more than quantity. And this applies to everything, to possessions, to relationships, to experiences, to how you spend your time. I would rather have one beautiful piece of jewelry that I love and wear all the time than a jewelry box full of things I never touch. I would rather have 3 really good friends who I can be completely authentic with than 30 acquaintances who I have to perform for. I would rather have 1 meaningful experience than 10 superficial ones. I would rather read 1 really good book deeply than skim through 10 mediocre ones. And that shift from quantity to quality has enriched my life in ways I cannot even describe. Because when you focus on quality, you're focusing on what actually matters. You're being intentional. You're making choices based on value rather than volume. And that intentionality creates a richness in your life that no amount of stuff or commitments or superficial experiences can create. The freedom of letting go. I want to talk about what happens when you start to let go of the excess, when you start to simplify, because it is freedom. It is absolute freedom. Every time you let go of something that you don't need or don't love, you free yourself from the burden of that thing, from the weight of it, from the responsibility of it. And at first, letting go is hard, especially if you're someone like me who held on to things for decades, who had sentimental attachments to everything, who felt guilty about getting rid of things. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And the more you realize that the things are not the memories, the things are not the people you loved, the things are just things. And when you let them go, you don't lose the memories, you don't lose the love, you don't lose anything that actually matters. You just lose the weight, the burden, the clutter. And in its place, you gain space, you gain freedom, you gain peace, you gain time and energy for the things that actually do matter. I have let go of so much in the past few years, so much, and I have not regretted a single thing, not one. And every time I let go of more, I feel lighter, I feel freer, I feel more like myself. What simplicity taught me about myself. You know, the beautiful thing about simplifying your life is that it teaches you who you actually are. Because when you strip away all the stuff, all the commitments, all the roles you think you're supposed to play, all the things you think you're supposed to have, you're left with yourself, just yourself. And that can be scary at first because maybe you don't know who that person is. Maybe you've been hiding behind the stuff, behind the busy calendar, behind the roles for so long that you've forgotten. But I'm telling you, it is worth the discomfort. It is worth pushing through that fear because on the other side of it, you find yourself. You find what you actually love, what you actually value, what actually matters to you. And for me, what I found is that I don't need much. I don't need a big house or a lot of stuff or a packed calendar. What I need is meaningful connection with the people I love, creative expression through my work, time in nature, good food, quiet moments to think and reflect. And all of that is simple. All of that is available to me without all the excess. And understanding what I actually need as opposed to what I thought I needed has been so freeing, so empowering, because now I can make choices based on my actual values rather than on what I think I'm supposed to do or have or be. How to start simplifying your life. I know that some of you watching this might be thinking, okay, this all sounds wonderful, but I don't even know where to start. I'm overwhelmed by all the stuff, all the commitments, all the chaos. How do I even begin? And I want to tell you, start small. Start with 1 drawer, 1 closet, 1 shelf, 1 commitment. You don't have to simplify your entire life overnight. In fact, you can't. It's a process. It's a journey. And if you try to do it all at once, you'll get overwhelmed and you'll quit. So start small. Pick one small area of your life and simplify that. And notice how it feels. Notice the sense of accomplishment. Notice the peace that comes from having that one area simplified. And then do another, and then another. And over time, those small acts of simplification add up. And before you know it, your entire life starts to shift. And you start to experience that freedom, that peace, that luxury that comes from simplicity. And be ruthless. Be honest with yourself about what you actually need and use and love. If you haven't used something in a year, get rid of it. If you don't love it, get rid of it. If it doesn't serve a purpose, get rid of it. Stop holding on to things out of guilt or obligation or because you spent money on them. The money is already spent. Keeping the thing doesn't change that. The invitation to a simpler life. So here's what I want to leave you with today. Simplicity is not about deprivation. It's not about living with nothing. It's about living with intention. It's about surrounding yourself only with the things and the people and the commitments that truly add value to your life and letting go of everything else. And when you do that, when you simplify, you discover that you actually have more time, more energy, more peace, more freedom, more joy, more space for what actually matters. And that, my friends, is the greatest luxury. More money cannot buy it, stuff cannot give it to you, only simplicity can. So I'm inviting you today to start simplifying. Start small. Start with one area of your life and notice how it feels. And I think you'll find that once you start, you won't want to stop. Because the freedom that comes from simplicity is addictive in the best possible way. And remember, you are not your stuff. You are not your commitments. You are not your packed calendar. You are so much more than all of that. And when you simplify, you give yourself the space to discover who that person is. And I think you're going to love what you find. Please do something wonderful for yourself today. Something simple, something that brings you peace, something that reminds you that the best things in life really aren't things at all. And as always, share the love with your family and your friends, and remember to keep some of that love for yourself. And let's all pray for world peace. And remember that you are never alone, and you are always, always loved. Take care, and I hope to see you in my next video. Be blessed.